Welcome to the Healing My Parts podcast, a podcast dedicated to educating and raising awareness about dissociative identity disorder, also known as DID. We are your hosts, the system behind Healing My Parts, which also includes parts that function as a therapist and leader in a mental health niche space. We'll be sharing tips and tools that have helped us and many others, while also sharing insights from our own journey of living with the condition. We'll also be hosting guests for conversations to help educate, dispel myths, and most especially help those living with dissociative identities and professionals who treat the condition. Thank you so much for tuning in. And now, let's get healing. Welcome to the show, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to welcome the Body-Wise Many Selves, One Body therapist today. And rather than me trying to go into what an amazing human being they are, I'm going to actually ask them to introduce themselves and let you know what they would like you to know about them.
Hello. Oh, this is so exciting. So we are Body-Wise, Many Selves, One Body. And we are a polyfragmented system and also a somatic trauma therapist, a brain spotter, yoga teacher, Reiki master, and lots of other things. We've come a long way to get where we are now. We've done so many different things, all sort of in the same direction, all about, we've always been interested in the body-mind connection, always focused on how to get through for ourselves. And then everything that worked for us, we've added into our toolbox as a therapist. So everything that people find or clients find in our treatment or session room will be literally tried out by ourselves.
So when we were chatting kind of back channel offline, you had mentioned that you guys are a polyfragmented system. Like, how did you figure that out? And even what is a polyfragmented system for people who have no idea? I feel like that is a term that confuses lots of people, professionals and systems alike.
I think that's a really good question. And it took us quite a while because when we first realized we had DID, it was in an instant. We went to bed one night and the next morning someone else woke up and it was like, hell, what's going on? What is this? From like being a woman to being a man in a female body all of a sudden overnight, that was a bit of a shocker. And the first thought was like, oh crap, we've got DID. You know, like we had already come across DID. We knew a lot of our trauma. We thought we had already done a lot of work and always questioned why we don't have DID, because we thought like we have enough trauma to actually maybe have DID. So it was almost a relief. So we totally skipped the whole denial out of our discovery of being a system. And I know a lot of people...
That's kind of amazing.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. Yeah, we went, wow, parts, yeah, hey, welcome. Tell me your story, or, what do you need? Or, like, who are you? Oh, there is an inner world. Wow, a whole forest in the mountain where parts can be rescued to, and all sorts of different areas. What was hard in the beginning was that we felt we didn't really fit into the whole DID. So we were looking at OSDD and DID. We joined a Facebook group. And a lot of the experiences other people described when with very distinctive alters, we felt that it wasn't quite the right thing for us. So there was we were absolutely sure we had DID. But then when we did research and reading, we did a DES or DES scale a few times, and we didn't really score that high. If we do it now, we score really high. But then on a good day, we don't. So maybe just, for other...
Awareness is everything, right?
For other systems who are on this journey of discovery, I think the DES is a really, really good scale, and it gives you an idea. But depending on who fills it in, it's not really that accurate, yes, you might come out as a severely DID system or deep in the DID spectrum. And on another day, you're just a bit of have a borderline personality or something, We found it very variable, really, when we filled those things in. how we figured out we are polyfragmented, it was just like, so within 2 weeks, we had like nearly 20 parts popping up. They were like mushrooms. They just came like, pop, 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 oh, hi, hi, hi. They were like, oh, awareness, let's say hi. And then it just didn't stop. Well, that's 5 years ago now, and it still hasn't stopped. And what we figured by now is, and I think that is typical of how we understand polyfragmentation, is so we have core parts or alters or insiders, whatever you want to call them, and then those parts have subsystems. And it's almost like the subsystems can be DID systems, but they can also be OSDD systems, because we had like this part that existed in every age, which is more an OSDD type criterion. All the same name, all looked exactly like how we would have looked at that age. And it only clicked the other day, like a few months ago. I was like, oh my God, my subsystems, some of them are OSDD systems. That's why it was so difficult to figure out where we fit in. Plus, we also, from the very beginning, we were co-conscious. When other people say we lose time and we don't know who we are, there was a lot of, I haven't got a clue who I am, but there was always a connection to the other parts. And once someone stepped in and we were aware about a part, we had their memories, more or less. Sometimes I wish I wouldn't know everything, because it's a lot to hold. And we've gone through quite a few hosts over the years. When they get to a place where they have reached the limit of holding the story and integrating the parts all together, and not integrating as in like they've gone, but having their story within our whole life story and not having amnesia about certain events. So sometimes we feel like, oh my God, we wish we had more distinct parts where we could literally leave things out of our consciousness. But that's not the case for us. We literally know everything that's been shared over the last 5 years, which got us multiple times to breaking point, really, because it's too much. On the other hand, we found knowledge keeps us safe. The more we know, the more we understand our story, the better we can protect ourselves, the better we can move forward, the better we understand if parts have reactions, we know where it's coming from, because we don't need to look for it, we know, we just remember. So then we can make sure those parts can be in a safe space if needed. Like for just before this podcast now, we got a bit panicky and a bit like, oh my God, should we really do this? This is scary. And realized that obviously speaking up or speaking your truth or being confident would have had incredibly dangerous consequences for us. So those parts don't understand that we are not in that situation anymore. So we've sent them into our mountain forest in our playground with one of our parts, who is based on, I always forget what the story is. This man with a bear in the forest somewhere in the Rocky Mountains. I don't know. I think Americans should know this because we know it and we're not even Americans. So yeah, it's like a really old, from the 70s or so, TV show.
Grizzly Adams?
Yes. So we have someone like him in our mountain area. So he looks after scared parts and he does an amazing job with that. So but it took us a moment to figure out, so what's the panic and what's the anxiety about? Because we are really excited about this.
To me, that makes so much sense. So for people listening, I also shared with them that still happens to us when we're guests on other people's podcasts, that for even a couple of days after, there's this, I describe it as, we're not quite right. There are just parts that get kind of all upside down, because in some ways you're breaking silence, potentially breaking programming about speaking out. Even if you're in spaces where you might not be identifiable, it feels really scary to parts. It makes sense. It's just really disconcerting when you're experiencing
Especially if you then have parts who are very much like, let's do this, like almost, sorry, there's a bit of a swear coming here. Fuck it, like we've come this far not to just be silent. We've not done all this hard work just for our own sake. We want to share hope and trust in the journey that, yes, it's really, really hard. It's really hard. And If you are lucky, you have good support, but most of us unfortunately don't. It took us a long time till we found community in peer support, till we were able to actually trust ourselves to step into a group of people with similar stories. But once we found that, the journey just, I don't know, the pace just got like motorway, from going on over like a very small, tiny countryside. I don't know if you have them in the States, but here we have like very, very small roads that are very scary to drive sometimes.
Depending on where you live, we do.
One day I will come. So I think we really want to share that, yes, it's really hard, it's daunting, it's overwhelming, it affects your health, it affects your functionality, it affects literally every aspect of your life. But for us, it has been the most empowering journey. I feel like we own our life now. We know our story, we know so many parts, and being polyfragmented, I've given up on counting. We have like whole armies of fragments who all hold an aspect of something, like of fear or terror or anger or who knows what. And when they come, when people talk about flooding, it is literally like an ocean breaking down on you with that particular feeling. So yeah, it's not been easy, but we recognize what's coming. We can do something about it. We have a massive toolbox by now. And as I said earlier, that's probably how I came into the somatic trauma therapy to work as a therapist as well, because the somatic work was where real change started to happen. I've done so much talking therapy before I knew I was a system. I've always been interested in body-mind. I've always done yoga, martial arts. I've done lots of different trainings as a holistic therapist, but experiencing it for myself, how working with the body really made a huge difference. I've been very lucky. I've always had therapists who had a very good understanding of DID and plurality, and that it's very, very different to work with a system to working with singlets. But what one of my therapists always says is like, well, you all share the same body. And in the beginning, I found that very, very annoying. So what do you know? Like,
Agree.
yeah.
It is annoying though.
They're generally very annoying, aren't they? Yes,
We
yes,
are,
I know,
yes.
I know. Every time I'm annoying to my clients, I think like, haha, I can't pass that on.
We've come full circle.
Totally. Yeah, but it works. It really, really works. It makes such a big difference to allow the body to process what it holds.
That's a place that I feel like so many of us get confused. I think there's so many of us that are used to living from the neck up. We get super disconnected from the body. And there's so much literature out there now talking about how trauma is stored in your cells and it's stored in your body, and you need to let the body process it. And there's something that feels really terrifying about that for many systems.
Yeah.
What would you say to them about that? Where would we start if we're like, okay, it's probably time to explore what's below the neck and how to get this process? Where do we go? Where do we look?
Well, I totally get that. I still am scared of my body. I used to do body stuff all the time, and then my system came out and I couldn't do yoga, I couldn't go swimming, I could barely leave the house. Safest space was my bed, like don't move. It was really hard because I felt like I've lost all my tools overnight and I wasn't able to access them. And I was in a trauma clinic, and I was very lucky because they had IFS, sensory motor, psychotherapy, somatic experiencing, polyvagal. So they were very, very amazing in how they then also blended it uniquely to each client, what they needed. And they would do these like meditations at every beginning of every session. And I would just focus on your breathing. And I was dissociated. That was it. I said, I'm not going to breathe. I literally dissociated, stopped breathing, and just sat there and waited till the session was over. That was it. And that took many, many months for me to not do that. I mean, I figured I'd leave before the meditation, I come back in after the meditation so that I could actually access therapy. But it was terrifying. Like my body has experienced so much terror and horror. Of course I want to stay away from that. There is a reason why I'm polyfragmented, or why we have DID. There's a reason why the walls are up and tiny, tiny fragments hold tiny, tiny aspects of one memory, it wasn't survivable. I always feel like, well, I don't like the disorder in DID. I think it's amazing how our brains create a way of surviving the impossible and the unimaginable. We come from very organized abuse. It was hard to remember those memories and to let parts come forward with those memories. And they were very, very physical for us. We had a lot of body flashbacks before we had actual memories. That was horrific and that was scary. And we were really lucky that we had therapists who could hold us and the body with whatever came up. I think that was really important for us, that they weren't scared when we were so scared to touch on any of this. And what I would like to say to other systems is respect the fear of not getting in touch with the body, because it's there for a really, really good reason, like don't push it. And it's very different if you go to a yoga class or if you do somatic therapy. A yoga class, and even that a lot of people struggle with because memories are coming up. But in a somatic therapy session, you're there on your own with a therapist who looks at your body. I mean, quite often I say I turn around and I'm not looking, but it is terrifying to connect with a body that's been harmed. You try very hard not to go there. So I think in therapy it needs to be, well, I think the relationship between client and therapist is really, really important. And to figure out tools that work for regulation so that if needed, the therapist and the client know what works. I wouldn't go in with any client, just go, oh, let's just do some processing. When I have no idea what the story is, I have no idea what the reaction will be. So I take a lot of time to work out, how does a client actually respond? Do they notice anything in their body? Because quite often we don't. And sometimes it's literally just a foot massage or some very simple things that really aren't simple. And I think the beautiful thing with body-based therapies for us was it doesn't need to be a big thing that we do. Sometimes we feel like the smaller the practice or the experience is, the more powerful it is. Sometimes it would take us several sessions to reach our hand out to the therapist, and my hand would shake like crazy. They were very young ones. They were so terrified because reaching out wasn't allowed, would have been very dangerous. And our therapist just literally held her hand there till we were ready. And then we would sort of just touch the tip of the finger and go back again. And then, nothing happened. Maybe we can try that again. Or maybe try it next week. It is really, really slow when you really do the work with the little wounded ones. But I'm thinking back of how we started, it's a totally different ball game. We can do a lot of things now, and we can actually work. So that's really cool.
I'm just thinking about how there's so much hope in everything that you're saying. And for people who are in that space where your body has been the battleground for such unimaginable horror, and it's so scary, there is a level of bravery to just step forward and even do something like touch fingers with somebody else and be able to feel the sensation of it when you're so numb from the neck down. But you're giving people so much hope, right? If you're going slowly and it's paced, it can open up a whole new world for the entire system, for parts to be able to live in the world in a different way that maybe feels better.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm curious, for somebody who's really, really scared, which is most people who live with DID and OSDD, right? Would you suggest that they potentially start with something that's more of an energy-based healing modality for the body first, where there isn't somatic touch or sensations? Curious.
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I've been a Reiki master long before I started exploring becoming a therapist. And my own journey with Reiki, oh my God, it's always brought a lot of stuff up. I don't know. I don't barely do Reiki now with clients, but occasionally I do. But it's very, very different. I literally do parts Reiki now. So parts start talking to me when I do Reiki. They were like, do not touch that part of the body. And I go, oh, okay, I'll keep my hands off. Where can I touch? It's totally changed. While like normal traditional Reiki is like you touch the body and you go through certain positions and do whatever you do. But I also trust that people find the right next step on their journey. And I think a lot of the time questions, so what shall I do? What's helpful? I don't know about others, but we've been researching like crazy. What works? What shall we do? Like, how do we do this? And for a long time, we felt like we know more than the therapist. So we would go like, oh, read this book, do that. Yeah, it took us a while till we found people who felt like, oh, I think maybe they know remotely a tiny bit more than us. They are slightly ahead. And then eventually we found someone where we felt like, no, I think that we're in good hands here. They actually have a clue what they're doing. But I think like it's really important. I want to give this to people to say, trust your journey. Like if you feel drawn to Reiki or to whatever, there's so much out there that can be important for your next step. What that is for each system, only the system will know. If something resonates, try it out, like, and especially when people don't even know they're a system. If something resonates, follow your gut. What I always say to clients is like, well, they say like, oh, you know it all. And I said, I have a lot of tools and I can hold a space, but I want to empower you. We're not going to do anything just because I say it. We're going to take a moment and see if that actually resonates with you. If it terrifies you, we can have a look who is so terrified and what do they need to be less terrified, or maybe it's just not the right thing for right now. And then we find something else. I feel like I want you to find a way of actually getting the answer within you rather than me telling you what's best, because I don't know. A lot of things that I've come across that work for many, many people did not work for us. I don't know. Some things are clear why they didn't work, others aren't. I've stopped questioning it now. I'm just going with like, okay, if it doesn't work for us, if there's a lot of resistance, maybe I can look into why there's a resistance, or I just accepted that this isn't the right thing and there might be something else coming. And I think that's helped us a lot to, even when it got really, really dark and very scary and terrifying to face things, there was, and I don't quite know where that's coming from, but there was always the trust was always there.
I'm listening to all that you're saying, and for me, it's bringing up a lot of things that I used to do for our system, the things that really resonated. And I still get like, it's like getting a longing for something and then following that thread, and it usually leads to something good. So historically, there was something called polarity therapy that I did way back in the 90s that was really helpful in understanding just how my body lives in energy. Apparently, it's not a fan of the Earth's energy. It's apparently a little dense for us. Can't imagine why. And lately, I feel really pulled towards sound healing. I don't know why, but I have this almost like this cellular craving to be in crystal sound bowls.
Oh, I totally relate to that. Yes, yeah. And I think that's so beautiful when you can start to follow those impulses.
That's a good word for it.
Yeah,
impulse.
And I find, looking back now, I find my back systems and my inside parts have, for a very long time, they've had the strings in their hands. So they've been pulling me in different directions. Oh no, push, do this, learn that. I've done so many trainings and things as a holistic therapist that were exactly the missing parts that I needed to go further on my journey to discover my story. It's genius. Like, it's really genius. It's almost like I have a bad experience that I don't remember. And then my back parts go, oh, do this, try this, because that will counterbalance the bad experience. Looking back, it's like, oh my God, it makes a lot of sense. Don't know if you can relate to that.
I'm thinking about a couple of things that you're saying without saying, which is, it sounds like there's always a group present as you're moving through life, right? It's not necessarily there's one singular part that moves to the front and it's all by itself and then kind of moves back. And, it's this whole group that's cooperatively, probably not always cooperatively.
That would be
right. Life would have been easier. I think it can help people understand how the system has always worked, even when we didn't know it was there, even when we didn't understand how it was working, that there are parts that know what to do. And so today, when you say, oh, if this thing came up and I don't know what I need or why, there's a part in the back that sort of leads us in the right direction and something good comes from
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And when people can start to lean into, it's so hard to say this because I know it comes with so much emotional turmoil and terror and all kinds of really hard feelings and somatics, but if you can lean into the wisdom of the system to trust the fact that you're still here. Like it figured out
Yeah.
how to make sure that you're still here. And I get that for some folks listening, still being here is not a pleasant thing because of how much they're suffering, but it's the step in the right direction to getting
Yeah.
relief.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So if you've made it through the horror, you're in the suffering now, but there is so much hope and so many different avenues
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah. And it's been really mind-blowing for us now that we have more understanding of what they were doing in the back. Because for quite a while, we didn't have access to their planning. They would just come forward as very young parts and we worked through the trauma. And now they are the older ones. So they are sort of like in their 20s, those parts. They tell us, oh, and then we did this and then we did that. And I go like, oh my God, they're geniuses. They're absolute geniuses. And in the beginning of our journey, we all of a sudden we fused. And I was like, oh, weird, this is so quiet. I don't like this. But I also felt like, oh, look at me, only a year into my DID journey and we fused already. There was a bit of like, this is a good thing, isn't it? But it didn't feel good. It did not feel good. It just happened. Everyone stepped in and we became this one person. And we really hated it. But I think we needed to have that experience to stop chasing that goal. And then another memory came up. And that host was like, I can't cope with this. I cannot do this on my own. And everyone was there. And that's when we started to trust and to say, okay, if everyone isn't needed, we might feel more like integrated or fused or whatever you want to call it. But I can trust my system that if needed, I will have everyone on board and they will get me through. And that's what they've done my whole life. And looking back now, it's absolutely mind-blowing. I know for those who are in the midst of finding out and really not in good and safe places at the moment with their mental health, it probably doesn't sound beautiful. But for us, we've come to this place where we can see the beauty of our system. I really hope that this is encouraging and not off-putting when we say this, because I remember being in therapy and therapists telling us like, but it will change. And I was like, who are you? You don't know shit, We had very, 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 very sweary, grumpy teenagers, and they made their voice, their opinion very well known. Oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. When I look back, I think like, oh God. But we were also lucky that those therapists could hold the space for everyone who turned up. And for that, I feel like, I always thought like, how can I give back to those therapists? Because without them, we wouldn't be where we are now. And then I hope it's okay if I just pass the knowledge on to my clients. I sort of, this is maybe something interesting because we made introjects of all our favorite therapists. So when we are in our therapy room with our clients, we have like little tiny therapist introjects, like saying like, look at this. It's really funny.
That's so smart.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And then we
smart.
have our other parts who look through the words and look what is the body doing and go, okay, do you remember that would be helpful for us? We liked that. We didn't like that. So we always had our own little therapist part when we are in therapy, checking in and making sort of like a list. It's almost like a life training course that we've been on like forever to figure out what works and what doesn't. And sometimes something works and is really uncomfortable. And sometimes something works because it's nice. And to realize for us, sometimes the therapist has to be a bit mean, like or hard or direct and push you to the edge, knowing that they can hold whatever happens next. That's been a very, very profound experience for us.
Can imagine because I'm thinking about the amount of trust that it also
Yeah,
takes to go there, to trust that the other person really can hold it, especially when you're talking about levels of horror that are absolutely unimaginable to
yeah,
people who don't have similar histories. It's a lot
yeah.
of trust.
As I said before, we have been very, very lucky with our therapists. Yeah.
But it's really hopeful because when you say we've been lucky with our therapist and there's an S on the end of it, it means there's
Yes,
more than one
yes,
person in the
there
world
are.
that can do it. Because sometimes when you're the person going through it, you're the beginning of your journey and you're so overwhelmed, it doesn't feel like there's
Yeah,
anybody else out there. It doesn't feel like there's anybody like you out there. And it doesn't feel like there's a therapist that's going to get it.
yeah.
And that's a really scary, lonely, hopeless place to be. And so everything that you're saying, I think, is a lifeline of hope for folks in
Yeah.
that
I
situation.
also have to say we have been lucky in the way that we were able to pay privately. So this is nothing we got from insurance or that was paid for. We literally paid for all our therapy. And I know not everyone has that luxury. You know, there is. We also
Yeah.
had therapists who very kindly gave us a very reduced rate when we really couldn't, pay, which was difficult to accept. And again, we're just very grateful for that.
It's such an important issue, though, because accessibility is so real. You know, a lot of people, we both know, right, that people with DID very often can spend at least some portion of time on disability, which means you don't
Yeah,
have the financial means to go out and just pay for what you might need. And there aren't a lot of people doing this work to begin with.
yeah,
So it is
yeah,
challenging. But what I also really love about what you're talking about is that not everybody absolutely has to have a talk therapist in order to heal
yeah,
and progress in life as a system. That there are a lot of different modalities that can be healing and helpful.
yeah,
And sometimes it is, right, that a yoga class can be affordable when something else that might be individual at the moment is out of reach. And being able to take advantage of some of those things, whether it's share peer support access points or yoga
yeah,
classes or something that is
yeah,
free when there are demos to learn a new skill for yourself and your system can be
yeah,
super
yeah,
helpful.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
If you're okay circling back to something, I know that there are going to be folks that were listening and wondering. So, in the beginning, it is so common for somatic memories to come back in the body and they're horrible. And when you have them sometimes every day, people don't know how to get through them. Were there things or are there things that you know of that can help people that are stuck in that place? Like I have the somatic awful experiences in my body and maybe I don't have the narrative or the visual memory that goes with it, but it's miserable.
Yeah. Well, that's a very good question. And sometimes I don't know. Sometimes I just let it happen, trusting that it will pass.
Mhm.
I think seeing the body as a part is for us quite important. It's literally just another part. Or sometimes there are different parts at the same time in the body, and that's why the symptoms are so confusing and vague and don't match any medical definition of anything, really. I think it's very hard. I think it's one of the hardest things to be exposed. I mean, we had like non-epileptic seizures. We had, yeah, I think that those were the scariest ones. We are lucky again in a way because we relatively quickly figure out what the memory is, and then we can work with the part. And then we can go in and sort of create a new neural pathway, a new outcome to the situation that was impossible back then. And we do that with a therapist, but we have also done it on our own. I mean, I'm a brain spotting practitioner. I've done a load of brain spotting on my own. Something comes up, I haven't quite got a clue. I get my pointer out and I do a bit of brain spotting. So, yeah, I don't know. That is a good question. And I don't think I've got a straightforward answer to that, really, because it really varies. I find sometimes sleep helps to reset the system. Sometimes it helps to move, to change the scenery, to go to the park or do something that we do feel comfortable with. Sometimes I think dissociation is beautiful. Like I love a bit of binge watching. If the symptoms get too intense, and that could be like body flashback, but it could be almost emotional flashbacks. If it gets too much, I need to switch off. And as I said before, we don't switch in a way that we don't forget. We still know. And it's really hard to use dissociation in a way where we go, okay, we're just going to switch totally. That doesn't happen for us. So we quite often then choose something. Films have been massive on our healing journey, especially like films where you fight someone really tiny like The Hobbit or like Never-Ending Story. It's so hopeless to fight the darkness and still somehow they win. And I always see everyone as like Lord of the Rings, a system story. Like you have the dark looming, whatever happened to you, that's a trauma. And then you have this whole team of people who support you. And sometimes they do their little journeys on completely different ends within your system, but with the same goal, to destroy the ring. And for us, that was sort of like, and I haven't mentioned this before, but we have a lot of mind control. And we found like we can deprogram so many things until we found our ring and destroyed the ring, the core programming where it all began. We will always reinstall programming. That's how programming is set up. We have so many parts. Someone will reinvent the wheel and whoops, there's another program. So we had to find the ring, and then we rewatched the whole Lord of the Rings series again and found our way of like the very end when he does throw the ring into the fire. And it's really hard to let go of. And it was really, really hard to let go of because it does also give us some structure. If you've lived all your life with programming, like not to have programming is a bit like, ooh, I haven't got a clue what I'm doing. How can I live without someone telling me how to do this? Like how, whoa, like that was scary. But we found like that films, Hunger Games, all these films where it's like, where little people fight against impossible forces and they win. My part's always like, oh, we can use this, or oh, do it that way, like, oh, that's the next step. So sometimes when we are totally overwhelmed with either body flashbacks or emotional flashbacks or just despair or suicidality or whatever comes up on the journey, we find that binge watching or watching certain films really help us to get through. And then for us, sleep is a big one because it really resets the system. And then obviously from a somatic therapy point of view, there are a lot of tools and practices that can work to regulate, to reorient. There's certain practices to keep centering yourself in the here and now. Very hard times when we thought we don't know how to get through the day, we would literally just sit on our sofa with our cat and go, okay, the cat is real, the cushion is real, the cup with coffee is real. I can't go any further. I don't know what else is real right now because it's so confusing in my head. But these are things that I can touch. This is very, very real. And no one can take that away from me. And then I would go to the next bit, and the next moment, and the next moment, and the next moment. I don't know if that makes sense to people, but yeah, that was very helpful for us.
It is really helpful. Like for some folks, it can be really helpful to just grab a cup of your favorite hot beverage or really cold beverage, and that can be something that's like, I can feel that and it's real right now. When we had a conversation earlier on, we were talking about like therapy matching or not needing to match the horror and the extremes that people have gone through. So like we're not re-traumatizing parts, or we're not re-traumatizing them, so that therapists have to really understand the level of horror and the level of extremes so that parts don't have to act that out and therefore be re-traumatizing. Because there are a large number of clinicians that also listen, I wonder, would you be able to explain that a little bit for them?
And that was a very difficult one for us because our system was we were sure it needs to match at least how horrible it was, if not go beyond that. It was very hard, and we still struggle with that when we do nice things because we feel like, nah, that can't be real. Like if we do something nice, we take away how hard it was, because people are going to say, oh, you look really well today. And we're like, yeah, you don't know what's going on inside, you know. But in the therapy room, that's taken us a very, very, very long time. And again, I think we were very lucky because our therapists were very bound in a way of, once they got to understand our parts well enough, we still walked in and dissociated straight away a lot of the time. And it was like, they had really hard work to actually access us for quite a while. And inside was like, please rescue me, please rescue me. And they were like, can you move this? No,
Yeah.
obviously not. I've been sitting here for minutes now. Obviously I can't move, I can't say anything. Don't ask me so stupid questions like, can you move this or can you move that? And sometimes that was so annoying that it actually got us to the place to be able to act again, just because we were so annoyed with the therapist. But it took us a very, very long time. And I think it is really important for parts to be seen by the therapist. And I think for us, having the therapist, when we shared something, we can't cope when there's emotion on the other side, because we weren't allowed to show any emotions for a very long time. So it was important that our therapist didn't flinch whatever we shared. However horrific it was, even if they maybe hadn't heard it in that way before, they could not let us know. We needed to know that they are in the deep end with us and that they are absolutely capable of holding the space and seeing us through. And it took a long while till we trusted that they understood how horrific things were. And now we don't need to prove it anymore. You know, we know they get that. And I think that is like for therapists, and I think if a therapist has a client, especially when it comes to like organized extreme abuse, like ritual abuse, mind control, and that kind of stuff, and you're not familiar with it, start reading. I think for me, it is like, I would have been okay with a therapist who says, I don't know, but I'll look into it, I'll learn. But it probably would have been a lot slower progress. So the therapists I had, they did know about it and they knew about stuff, and still we had to be in the drama a lot for quite a few years, to be honest. It took a long time. And I think sometimes as well, it's like some drama sounds slightly negative here, but I think sometimes parts were acting out in, I show you how bad it was. If I don't have the feeling you understand what I've been through, I will show you the hard way. But then there's also times when it was really important for parts to come into the body, allow the body to work through the memory with another safe nervous system there that would hold the space, that where we could cling onto the hand or cling onto the, sometimes I was cling onto my therapist's leg for dear life, you know, like, I don't know, I was thinking like, oh my God, you know, like, but that was such a huge anchor, and it had such a deep impact for us afterwards, because there's always after processing when you go through the body memories. And then later on at home, maybe the video memories would come or the emotions would come. But my body remembered the shoulder I was leaning against or the hand I was holding. And that would give me the strength to then be at home and create parts who can also copy what the therapist did for us. Yeah, and then of course we have those interjects as well, so that was very helpful. So I think there's a difference between parts acting out in panic and go like, see me, see me, see me, why don't you see me? And parts having to go through an experience, but having an embodied different outcome. Literally rewriting the story in the body, which then the nervous system, it will trickle through. You know, it takes a long time, but it will trickle through. And I often thought, oh my God, so many parts have similar memories. Do we have to go through every single one? And that's not the case. I didn't believe it for a long time, but it actually really isn't the case, because parts can, once it's experienced in the body, well, every part is in the body. and then it can trickle through. And I mean, we have like all sorts of different information systems in our, so we have like lots of tiny little mice, and they can literally go undetected to everywhere in our system. And I mean, we are huge. We have a whole universe, there's several galaxies and all sorts of things. But they can literally go, and we had like, well, I say kraken, but it's like a giant octopus. And he can sprout information through the water, and that will go everywhere. So once we've embodied an experience and almost replayed a good outcome, some of our parts then can go and send that information on. And then occasionally someone hasn't been reached, and then they play it out again and go, oh, but remember, can we just go, do you remember this and this? And if they say no, maybe we need to go back and redo that again with a therapist. Sometimes we do brain spotting, sometimes we do EMDR. Yeah, but I think there's a big difference between parts playing out because they don't feel seen and allowing a safe way of working through a memory. And then obviously there's also parts who are just there to sabotage.
Yeah.
So the closer I got to rewire and actually process through a memory, then parts would come also in and sabotage the whole thing and either flood with something totally different or come in with dissociation and I couldn't move or talk or, And again, I think for the therapist, that is a tricky one. But I think, like, looking back, if a therapist gets it wrong sometimes, well, like, it's not the end of the world. Yeah. And I think if a therapist can say, oh, shit, I think I should have done that differently. What do you think? Or how was that for you? Like, bringing it out into the therapy room rather than trying, like, afterwards saying, like, oh, I could have done that differently. Oh, I'm certainly not going to mention that ever. I think, again, that builds this trust between all the parts, that they are all welcome. We're all learning and working together. And I think that is a really, really important message. I wish more therapists could hear, really, to not be so scared of systems or of dissociation in general. I've started these classes, somatic and yoga classes for systems. And when I first had that idea years back, I mentioned it to another yoga therapist, and she was like, are you mental? I was like, well, sort of. But she had all these worst case scenarios, like people are going to switch on the mat, they haven't got a clue what they're doing on the mat, why they're there, who am I, and I thought, like, well, I do a really thorough intake form, and we have a chat, we discuss dissociation, what works, what do you need to do. It's not a therapy class, and all that kind of things. And not once has someone actually, in my experience, that hasn't actually happened. And if someone gets so triggered by the somatic stuff, that the suicidality or the self-harm or whatever behavior there is that might not be the most beneficial, then we talk about it. I'm not going to let someone hanging there, but I wish people were less scared about it.
Yeah.
To invite those parts in that are really struggling, but they only do this for a good reason. And we live with it all day long anyway. Most of us have suicidal ideation. Like, I don't know a single system who hasn't. I mean, touch wood, we barely have it now. It's very, very rare. But, that saved us, knowing we have that option. That made us move forward, And yes, it's scary.
Yeah, there's so many things in life
Yes.
that can be scary, right? One of the things that keeps coming back for me while you're talking is the importance of compassion as the root of the entire process. If you're a therapist and you're listening, it is important that you understand the level of extreme horror that your clients have survived, and that you need to be able to hold that and have things in place for yourself. But you do also need to be able to reflect the emotional resonance of what your client is saying. Like, we can't sit in front of blank slates who can hear anything and it doesn't matter and it just bounces off, because that's the same as not being heard. There has to be some register that this is emotionally difficult. And if you're reflecting back the difficulty and the compassion to the client, we can then absorb that. And like you were talking about, when you're home and some of the other stuff starts coming up for further processing, we can kind of
Yeah.
embody that within ourselves and get us through, and hopefully avoid some of the more challenging situations like active suicidality or some
Yeah.
severe self-harm. And you're also bringing up a really good point, right? Sometimes that suicidality or self-harm is the bailout plan. If it gets really bad, I know that I can X, which does
Yeah.
terrify many.
Oh, it is. It is very terrifying.
Part of me is wanting to say, what would you say to a therapist that's terrified of suicidal or highly programmed parts? Because they
Yeah.
exist, right? We can't pretend they're not.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think for me, it's important that the therapist is honest, and genuine. So if a therapist is scared, I'd rather know that. Because I sense it anyway. My system is an alarm system that
True.
is geared for like literally anything. Always know what people feel, and sometimes that then ends up that people don't like me because they are uncomfortable because I look through them and I go like, But I think for a therapist to be authentic and to say, actually, I'm a bit in my deep end here. We need to talk about this suicidality. Bring it out into the open. Talk about, do you have actual plans? Or is this more of like a meditation for you? For me, it was a meditation, a daily meditation. I said that to a client the other day, and she was like, oh my God, you're crazy. No one's ever talked about suicidality with me like this. Normally people panic. And I was like, yeah, I know. But where are you sending? Let's come to that, back to that, And I think that builds trust. And I think that's the most important thing. I think people who don't bring the suicidality into the therapy room are so much more at risk of actually planning and doing something. If people are talking, that is parts, and even without DID, like that's parts screaming for help. Like we cannot cope. We don't know. It's so intense and overwhelming. We don't know anything else to do with this pain, physically or mentally, other than taking our life. And I think sitting with that is very, very uncomfortable and very difficult. But I think pushing that out of the room and ignoring it and not creating space for it is a lot more dangerous.
Yeah. There's risk inherent in everything, and being afraid of suicidal parts or highly programmed parts doesn't make them go away, and it doesn't lower the risk. I think you're pointing out it actually elevates the risk. So inviting it in, it also, to us, when a therapist is willing to hear anything and everything and really engage with some of the most difficult aspects of the systemhood, it creates a feeling of partnership. It's that place where you don't feel quite so alone. It's really alienating, I think, when a therapist is so afraid of what might be coming up, or they're so afraid a lot of times of the liability, like, oh my God, what's going to happen to me if something happens to my client? I've definitely heard therapists say that. And it's not about you in those moments, and being able to be a good partner in a system you can figure it out together.
It is a partnership, isn't it?
Very much so. I really do believe that it's the relationship itself that's the vehicle that gets us through our healing, right? So if we're really partnered, we have a really strong relationship and trust there, you can get through pretty much anything.
Yeah. And I think in a relationship or in a partnership, I'm just thinking about contracts and boundaries. And I think what I've heard from other systems more than from other therapists about therapy where it didn't go so well was where the therapist couldn't keep the boundaries well enough. And I don't get me wrong, I understand that.
Yeah.
If I have very convincing littles who, they want attachment, and if they don't get it, well, we dissociate, like, ta-da, do what you want with that, well, doesn't get us anywhere, but, for them, that was their only, that's all they knew. So, and sometimes I heard from systems where the therapist would be really motherly with young parts And oh my God, we were jealous. You know, we were like, "Oh, we just have like these really hardcore bitches." Oh my God, they're probably going to listen to this eventually. You know, all we wanted to do is like, can you just please hold us forever and never, never let go again? You know, like, because, you know, poor us, look what we've been through. But I don't think,
I have parts right now that are like the polar opposite, that are like, get the fuck away from me.
you're the opposite.
Like, so many words like, get the fuck away. Sorry. So loud
Yeah,
right
where
now.
was I now? Okay, I have no idea.
Well, the hardened bitches, you were the therapist as
I do
compared
love
to
my
the,
therapists, you know, like I
the
really, really
motherly
do love
type.
them, and they know that. Yeah, but if they had been too soft with us and with our system, I don't think I would be where we are now. And you know, and we still feel
Yeah.
very dependent on our therapist, which really annoys us, like big time. So I can't imagine how people would feel if the therapist gives in to those young parts who just want to be held or mothered or whatever their needs are. I mean, the dependency must be crazy, you know. And for us, it's like there are very clear boundaries, you know. And well, we have worked for a long time now, and she knows us really well, and she will literally just call bullshit on our parts when we try occasionally again. And it's very annoying, and it's really hard, and we really don't like it. But when she set like really strict boundaries and going like, no, no, I'm not going to help you. I cannot work with you if you dissociate every single time you're here. There's no point. Oh my God, that was a really hard session when that came like the first time. She let us play around with it for a while. And then there was a session, I remember that so vividly, where she said like, no, no. And we were sitting on the floor and she was sitting slightly away from us and I couldn't move, I couldn't talk. And then after, I don't know how long, I said like, I cannot talk. And she said like, well, you've just spoken. Oh my God. I was, you know, infuriated because I was like, does she not know how hard this is? Well, she did know very well how hard that was, but she also knew
Yeah.
if she jumps in helping us to regulate every single time, we will not have the experience that we can do that on our own. We did get through that and we left
Yeah.
very grumpy and sat in a cafe afterwards. And it was sunny, it was outside, it was really beautiful. It was sort of like springtime, I think. And it was like, I was so present. And, you know, I was like, I sat there and I thought like, this is so weird. Why does this thought, life is good, come up after that session? That was horrific. That was horrible. And we went back the next week and I thought like, oh my God, that was, I think, our best session. And I was very surprised that those words came out of my mouth. But after that, I trusted her. If she said, no, I'm not going to help you with this, you do that. This bit you do on your own. I knew, and everyone else knew, like, do you remember when that and that part had to do that? That really sucked, but actually it was really effective.
Yeah. Yeah. This is such an important conversation. I'm thinking about all of the, boy, all of the things that I've seen. You know, it's so almost intoxicating for little parts to get that kind of love and affection or physical hugs or whatever it can be. But it also looks to me on the outside when when I've done consultation or I just am privy to other systems sharing some of their experiences, it looks kind of disastrous because what I've seen is a system that gets stuck in this cycle, right? Of I feel terrible, I go to therapy and I get literally held, and then that's all
Yeah.
they do for
It doesn't
5,
change
10,
anything.
15, 20 years, and they don't get to experience nothing. And I think, though, that it's important for therapists to find that it's hard to
Yeah.
thread the needle with the system, but if you feel your way through it, you can. I mean, just because we're sitting here talking about boundaries doesn't mean we're saying, don't have any contact in between sessions ever.
Yeah.
Don't be we're not telling you to be a blank slate. I think I have a therapist who I think currently threads that needle really well. She knows when to answer an email our system couldn't even email before this
Yeah.
particular therapist. There were
Yeah.
just rules
Yeah.
against that. But there are parts that are only present at certain times who hold a lot of really
Yeah.
important things that would never get into session if they didn't
Yeah.
email. But she knows when to answer, how to answer, and it's done in a way that I think provides those parts that are still
Yeah.
learning how to live in the world. It provides them a lifeline in between so they don't get all kind of out of control. But there's also zero dependency on being okay
Yeah.
in between, because it's given that like I'm here, and there is the expectation of, no, we're going to move forward. And if we've agreed to do something that hasn't happened, she's no problem bringing that up and holding our feet to the fire. But that's exactly how
Yeah.
you move forward. And when that happens, I think it's a statement of how much they really do care. Like, I care enough about you to help you not stay
Yeah.
stuck,
Yeah.
even though
Yeah.
it can be hard and
Yeah.
uncomfortable and kind of shitty.
Yeah. And I think a no is like a yes, isn't it? It's a yes to you. Yeah, I can't
Yeah.
explain it right now. I haven't got the words right now, but it's like, it's not a no to you as a whole person. It's a no because you actually matter. I'm not, if I were a child, a toddler, well, you're not going to give everything to a toddler, are you? Because that's going to, that's not going to be
Right.
that's not going to end well. Yeah, they want, but yeah, it's not really that great if they just get everything. And I think I find like
Yeah.
the way I work with my clients is like I do work with the adult, but everyone's welcome. But the adult needs to be sort of present enough to be held responsible in a way. I always say, like, well, you hold your little ones and your wounded past, and I am here to support you on that journey. And I find that well, I hope that's received well, and that gets them to a place where they are empowered. And in my sessions, we then also look at, okay, so what do the parts need for you to leave this room and be functioning enough? What do we need to put in place for you to not walk out like a 5-year-old, totally distraught and upset or angry or hurt? And I think that that's really important as well, to communicate very clearly with your clients, to say, like, okay, yes, everyone's welcome, but, when you leave, I need an adult to leave. I need someone who can drive. I need someone who understands how to walk home or whatever. And that needs to be a contract between the therapist and the
Yeah.
client. I was very annoyed when I was in clinic and they would let me go home over the weekend, and we would Fridays like have horrendous sessions, and I didn't trust myself to drive home over the weekend. And my therapist somehow felt like, no, you're going to be good. And I said, how on earth can she know that? Like, she's not even here on the weekend. And then it would come to the end of her workday and I would go, can we just have a quick chat before you leave? I don't think this is going to work. They're literally taking me apart. And then she would write a contract of like, you need to leave, let her leave, have a good enough weekend in order to do the work on Monday to continue with you guys. Otherwise, it's not sustainable. And I thought, like, I could have written that, but no one listened when I did it. Now I can make these contracts myself. But in the beginning, I couldn't. It was, they were like, yeah, why would we listen to you? And it was such a simple thing. Just a tiny letter of like, okay, let her get on with her life, we'll be back with you next week. And it was so effective. It was so effective.
Yeah. There's two things about that. One is, my God, it's so true. They literally don't listen to you, and they will listen
It's so
to it.
annoying.
Like, that's an absolute thing. It's so annoying. So it's like, can you kindly say the thing that I've been saying for the last like 5 days, and then they'll listen? Okay. Thanks for the disempowerment, guys. The other thing that I think is true is, because everybody's system's so different, and this is for the benefit of therapists listening, when it comes to saying that you need an adult present, I think you're right, but I think we can phrase it, somebody who at least can behave like an
of
adult.
course, yeah.
Who has
Yeah.
the ability, right? Because I'm thinking about systems. I have a 5-year-old
Yeah.
part that can
Yeah,
drive
absolutely.
just fine. She can get us home, and it's okay if she leaves. And I always bring this up. Poor Holly. I bring her up all the time. But the Petals of a Rose, Holly Crumpler talks about her 6-year-old part that can do the family's taxes. That we do have parts that might be 5 or 6 years old, but they've been 5 or 6 years old for 50 years. It's a little
Yes,
different than a regular chronological
absolutely.
5-year-old. I think it's important to be able to negotiate ahead of time, regardless of the age of the part. It needs to be a part that has the ability to safely get out of the office, back home, and take
Yeah.
care of whatever needs to be
Yeah.
done.
Yeah, absolutely.
Were we the ones that we were having a conversation about sometimes leaving therapy and needing, like, ending up in a parking lot somewhere for like 20
Yeah, and
minutes
not
trying to
parking
get
in front of
ourselves
the therapist's
together
house
afterwards? 'Cause
because it's intimidating.
yes, that's your kids can't stay in front of the office, gotta leave in case they come out, but it's like, I can't drive home. It's helping your clients not be in those
Yeah,
situations.
yeah,
Gosh, as we hide in grocery store parking lots trying to get our shit together to get
yeah.
home.
And I think again, what you just said, like remembering how different every system is. What works for one system doesn't work for the next. So we don't have little ones who could possibly drive, but almost all our very young parts are part of an OSDD system. We always thought they were H sliders until we realized, oh no, they are actually separate parts. But we can then go and get an older version of that same part. Even if that part can't because it needs nurture and care after the session, we still would have someone, to be able to drive. And quite often we will go somewhere into nature that's nearby. We switch enough to drive to a place where there's nature, and then there we see who needs sweets, who needs something else to eat after the session, and then we go for a little walk or something, or just sit under a tree or things like that, and just listen to the birds, or find spider webs or whatever we need to do a bit of grounding in between.
Yeah. Nature
Yeah.
can be so grounding. Yeah. It is. It's so important to be able to get through the rest of the week until the next time you can pick it back
Yeah.
up.
So, well, listening to that, I have a lot of, because we didn't do that for a long time. We weren't able. We jumped right into the deep end and, okay, let's keep it coming. So we weren't able to do that. And I think that's okay as well. And I think every system needs to, again, figure that out for themselves. For some systems, it's really important to keep functioning and go slower. And for others, it's like, nah, we've waited long enough. We do this, like, we jump right in. And obviously, we need to make sure it's not total overwhelm so that it's dangerous for the system or the host to cope. But I think it's like,
Yeah.
I've been in survivor groups very intensively the last 2 years. And although we have very similar stories, oh my God, we are all so different. And it's, I think for the therapist to be curious about that, to acknowledge the creativity in each system, how they survive and how they get through, and then work with that, what's presented. Rather than saying like, oh, we've heard this therapy or we read this book and there they say you have to do it this way, like that drives me insane. I'm very grateful for people to write books. I've got a lot out of books. I love books. Mm-hmm. I love research, all of that. But what's missing in all these books is the reminder. And I think we need this reminder over and over and over how unique everyone is. And that what works one week might not even work the next week. What works with one part doesn't work with the next part.
Yep.
So how do you want to write something to say like, well, if this happened, that you work with that in this way or in that way? I don't think that's possible because it's too complex.
I agree.
And I love IFS and I love brain spotting and EMDR and all these things, but they all need to be adapted. You can't just go in and go like, oh, I'm trained in this, and I do this, with a DID system as I do it with other people. It needs to be adapted to each client. This, and I know a lot of people don't like that because it's unpredictable and they like to have a guidebook of how things work. But I don't think that's very realistic. And I don't think that that offers the client what they need. And that is a flexibility. And when I say like they need to be able to be in the deep end with you, well, they need to be skilled swimmers. Whatever, if it's a river or the ocean, or if it's white water or a lake, like they need to be going with what's presented, and that might change a lot.
I can appreciate to some degree somebody's insecurity,
Yeah.
in wanting to have the guidebook or the manual that's going to get everybody through everything. But that's a fantasy. There's nothing that's going to work for every single system out there, even every single person who's
Yeah.
a singular identity. And I think the challenge comes into the level of trust between the two people in the room and the therapy relationship, but also we talked about the system trusting themselves to get them through. The therapist also needs to be able to get rooted in their own self-trust, that they have a level of training, they have a level of life experience. And when they can lean into their clinical intuition, you feel your way through the therapy with your client. Be present, and you move through it, trusting yourself, trusting the relationship, trusting what you know about the person sitting in front of you. And that way you can pull in the things that are most likely to be beneficial for the person sitting in front of you in that moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
The people that I see for consultation on either side, I do professional consultation and consultation for systems. The disconnect a lot of times can come in when the therapist stops trusting themselves and they do want to follow some type of manual, or they want somebody else to tell them what to do, when in fact they're really capable.
Yeah.
They're highly talented people. They just need a little more trust.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of magical though when people will lean into that big level of trust and compassion and just kind of love for each other.
Yeah.
People get all weirded out, when you say the word love in the therapeutic relationship. But if it's not, it's like, if it's not there, we've got problems. If it makes you feel better, you can call it unconditional positive regard, but it's still love.
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying. I have parts who go like, yeah, no. But and others like, oh, yes, we totally get that.
The partnership is so important. Gosh, what gives you guys hope these days? When you think about healing and systems and the state of,
Well,
I'm not going to say the state of the world.
yeah, no, I was just thinking, as long as I don't look out into the world too far, if I keep it to my own journey, I think for us, it's really, and I think we're in this transition space at the moment where we've done a load of really, really deep processing for years now. And like on end, there isn't a week where we haven't done that. And we are in this transition phase of, oh, hold on, like where are we going with all of this? Actually, we want a life. Pausing, for us, pausing is not easy. But when we are able to pause, and especially when it's another year and we have certain times in the year that are particularly hard, like November, December is like beyond hard. But last year, we managed without going into our trauma clinic. We made it through on our own. And I think just noticing those differences gives us hope. And again, the trust again to see like, no, but there is change. And it's like in the very beginning, when we figured out we are a system, we would rapid switch like all day long. We would blink and someone else, blink someone else. And it was like, sometimes I would start a thought and halfway through someone else had another thought. And then I had to make a very quick decision if I stay with the first one or the second one. And usually I lost both. And I would just sit there and think like, there was something really important and I have no idea. It was there a second ago. How am I going to function? Like I couldn't find anything. Because someone, would remember, oh, I'll put this here. This is a really good place. Everyone will remember this place. We've lost our driving license that way. It's somewhere in this house. We got a new one now, but where that really good place is that was so sensible to whoever put it there, I have no idea. And that doesn't happen anymore.
So relatable.
We can laugh about it now and go like, yeah, functioning was not, it didn't happen back then. Like it was a roller coaster and it was a storm and we were drowning. And occasionally we would come up for a little bit of air and then it would be like drowning again. it was wild and it was so scary. And now we are functioning most days, even when we do still have really horrible memories coming up. We're still discovering parts of our story, which normally would have taken us out for months. And now we can still function. We can still work. We can still, do certain things. Sometimes we need to slow right down, but to pause and see the differences, that's what gives us the most hope. And to see wow, we have actually come really, really far. Or we didn't know. In the beginning, you read books and stuff, but in the Facebook groups quite often, or in support groups, quite often there aren't people who are further on their journey, because everyone is just pedaling like crazy in their little stream, trying to survive. What's coming up and how to navigate a system, I found a lot of support there, but that didn't give me hope, because everyone was in the same place or similar places. And I find now it's I'm actually in a place where maybe I can give other systems hope who are starting this journey, because I am proof that it's possible. For so long, I wasn't even sure if it's possible. Or we, as our whole system, we were yeah, some therapists say it is, but what do they really know? Maybe they haven't worked with anybody like us. Maybe we are the first ones to prove them wrong. But what do they know? Once the client stops, they don't know how they continue afterwards. And I think hope for us also means to have a better understanding what healing is such a big word, but what feeling better looks like. It's not like I'm better every day. My good day is still a really, really crappy day for most other people, and they would not cope with my good days. They would be utterly overwhelmed with my good days. But that doesn't matter, because I cope, and it doesn't matter what other people think of it. I mean, sometimes I find people just can't relate to us. If we really are authentic, we scare a lot of people away. We've lost lots of friends on the way because we didn't quite know how to keep our boundaries. We didn't know how to communicate in a better way. We were so overwhelmed. We just flooded everyone with our stuff. And that was too much. They're not therapists, they're friends. And it put them in very difficult situations to say no, which they didn't do. And then the only options they had were to literally leave. And I can't even blame them for that, because it is really, really hard to support someone who goes through this. Yeah. But I'm finding new people now. There's space, and now the friendships I enter now, I enter in a different way. And that again gives me hope. So losing people isn't the worst in the world. Quite often those relationships might not have been based on the most healthy boundaries. People want to rescue, someone has to be rescued. We have all our little roles to play, isn't it? And yes, it hurts, but I can still keep those friendships. I often say they are like companions on the way. And while we were walking together, it was beautiful, and then it didn't fit anymore. Oh, that sounds really wise. Someone is going to say, you've sobbed your eyes out over those friendships. Yeah, I have, and it still hurts, and I still sob my eyes out over those friendships. But this is also true.
That's part of the speaking from the scar, not the wound. There is relational grief, and it is really sad, and it's really hard when you lose things along the way. But when you've grieved that loss, and there's healing that has kind of come in place, and we make those shifts and changes within ourselves, then I think we do have a wiser parts kind of come forward to show us a different perspective that you just literally spoke. I think it's really true, and it's really hopeful for people.
I hope. I would love to spread more of that. Yeah. I think that I'm hoping to... So this is the first time I've spoken up publicly, and it was very daunting. And I've literally, the body-wise, many selves, one body, is literally just being born. So it's very early days to be out there as a system and as a therapist. But we are all very excited about this. We are really excited.
So if people want to find you, on Instagram, where you're building, where can they find you?
Body-wise, many selves, one body. But at the moment, it's literally one post. So, but you can message me to get in touch, and then I can give you some more information if anyone is interested. So, yeah, and there will be more. There will be more coming.
Which is exciting. I feel like that it's a great time to go and follow you on that account to see all of the
Yeah,
things that are being
yeah,
birthed.
yeah.
It's,
And it's like,
I think it's going to be amazing. So we'll make
oh
sure to
yes,
link
please, that would
that
be
for
amazing.
people.
That would be really, really cool. Because I've been doing the trauma therapy for a while now, but I'm not out there as a plural therapist yet. I think eventually, hopefully, I will be brave enough to link the two. But I think for now, yeah, I'm just dipping my toes in how this feels, and I'm going to keep that separate.
I mean,
Yeah,
you're trusting your
yeah,
system, right?
yeah,
Which is
yes.
so important. For people that are listening, we've covered some really amazing ground. I wonder what you would like them to carry away from this conversation when you think about it.
Someone is going, it's just showing people like, it's not the end of the world to have the ID. It's sort of like, it is so daunting, isn't it, when you get the diagnosis or when you suspect it yourself. And I mean, a lot of systems don't even get a diagnosis. But it's not the end of the world. Even if you lose a lot of the ability of what your life was before, what you were able to work, or the friendships, relationships changing, it is like moving to a new country, and you just need to understand the customs and the language. And if you eat too much of a certain too spicy food, you might end up with lots of tummy aches. So it takes time to adjust to a new country. And I think that's what discovering your system was like for us. We traveled in Asia quite a bit. We were so excited and so curious about it, and a bit scared as well, because we did it on our own. But we met incredible people, and I think it's not the end when you get a diagnosis or when you figure out you have DID. I think that's sort of the message. Like, there will be changes, yes, but they won't be forever life-threatening or overwhelming. Yeah.
Yeah. It can be a beautiful journey as you get to know
Yeah.
parts of your system. Thank you so much for doing
Thank you
this
for
with
having
us.
us.
This has been such an incredible conversation with
I
you.
feel like we could just chat on forever.
And to everyone listening, thank you so much for joining us today for this conversation. There are so many deep and important takeaways, and we really hope that it supports you in your journey. So, whether you're a system supporter or provider walking with systems, if you found value in this conversation, we'd absolutely love it if you share it with others who might benefit from it. If you happen to be looking for bite-sized nuggets of support, you can follow us at Healing My Parts on Instagram. And if you're looking for more substantive information or support, subscribe to our Substack, healingmyparts.substack.com. And for other offerings, whether that's consultations or merchandise or other information and resources, check out our website at healingmyparts.org. And until next time, let's keep healing. Thank you for tuning in. You can find our blog on Substack at healingmyparts.substack.com and on Instagram at healingmyparts. Just a disclaimer, any information shared in this podcast is not a substitute for professional therapy or behavioral health care, nor does listening to the podcast constitute a therapist-client relationship. Please be sure to take extra good care of you. And until next time, keep healing and thriving.